So, hi everybody, my name is Tejas. Nice to meet everybody. So, in today's session, we're going to be talking about advanced automation with custom functions. So, Samir thought he was talking about advanced automation, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to recap some of the things that Samir talked about when it comes to workflows inside the CRM. I'm going to explain what these custom functions are, and then we're going to make a couple examples and see how they work inside the CRM. So, first things first, workflows. As I could tell you, I'm lazy. I want to be on the beach. I don't want to be doing manual things with my CRM, right? So I want to automate as much as humanly possible, so I have to do the least amount of work humanly possible, right? So when it comes to information in the CRM, people think they've got things set up properly, and you think you have your workflow set, and you think that the way you're working works for you. Maybe you want to tinker with it a little bit, but you think it's going good for you. You don't really want to mess anything up. So most people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So what you want to do is you need to be able to always think about, how can I make something better? That's the entire concept of a CRM system. You're never actually done administrating it, and you're never really done optimizing it. It's always an ongoing task of improving it, right? So there's a couple things we're going to be talking about on different ways custom functions can have the information that works already in your CRM and then take it to the next level by manipulating that information. So first things first, what if you could calculate how long it takes your sales rep to call your leads? So whenever people sign up for Zoho CRM, for example, we have a lead come into our company CRM, and then one of Ricky's sales reps will go and call them, right? And Ricky will run a report and say, look, sometimes it takes 2 hours to call a lead, sometimes it takes 12 hours to call a lead, and sometimes it takes 36 hours to call a lead. Maybe you want to get a notification saying that if it takes over 24 hours to call someone who's maybe filled out a web form, seems like a hot lead, get a notification for it. We can easily do that. Right now in the CRM with basic workflows, there's no way to really know how long it takes for something to happen in the CRM. You can make a formula field, but you're not going to know based on a note being created or some action happening in the CRM, cross-referencing that with the created time, doing a little bit of calculation, finding out how long it is, and then running another workflow based on that. Another example is, what if you could check for required information in a related module? So what that means is, let's say we go back to that termite example of the exterminator or whatever. Maybe someone schedules a cleaning session. And if I don't have their address, then I don't know where to go clean, right? So I have to check the contacts tab or module in the CRM, see if the contact information is there, maybe validate the address. A lot of times when you put your address on like shipping address on Amazon or whatever, it'll check the address, it'll find you, did you mean this address where the road has a period at the end, or it validates it based on the USPS address system. So you can do all that, validate it, make sure it's a legitimate address, and then allow you to schedule a cleaning. Otherwise, it'll throw an alert and say, hey, this doesn't work for you. So you need to check for information in a different module in the CRM before you can do something in your module in the CRM, before maybe you create a potential or before you schedule something. Another option, what if you could calculate how far someone is from you? Right? So some people who may be in the delivery business, or maybe you have couriers or something like that, you take the contact's address, you take your warehouse or your headquarters address, you do a little bit of calculation, and you find out, look, this guy lives 500 miles from me. So maybe my product that normally costs $10 now costs $10 plus a $2 extra delivery charge, right? So I can provide different logic based on what I'm charging simply on how far they are from me. Another example. What if you could automatically send an invoice when a potential closes? So just because your sales rep closes a deal in the CRM and says that potential stage is moved from whatever stage it was to closed one, you actually need to build a person. So how does that happen? Right now, there's not really a way to do it out of the box, right? Everyone uses probably some other invoicing system. Maybe you need to send a notification manually to your accounting team or finance team or whoever the person doing your finances is, and you're manually doing all that information. So whenever something gets updated, you can send all the information. Instead of sending it to a finance team for them to go take this email, which you can do in a workflow, send the information from the potential in an email and send it to the finance person. What if you just want to skip the middleman and have it input directly into your finance program? Maybe you use Zoho Books, hopefully. Maybe you use Zoho Invoice, hopefully. Maybe you use Xero or QuickBooks or some other third-party software. A lot of different options out there, but we want to push that information from potentials in the CRM directly to a third-party accounting software or invoicing software. That can totally be done, and only with the custom function. So what if you calculate the total revenue for a customer? So this is really important. So how many of you sell stuff to customers and they buy things multiple times from you? You're not like a one-and-done customer. Everybody's a one-and-done? Nobody wants to raise their hand. I get it. All right, so I'm going to assume that most people here are not one-and-done customers, right? So someone, in our example in the Zoho world, someone will come and buy CRM from us. 3 months later, they'll come back and buy campaigns from us. Maybe another 3 months down the line, they see the light and they buy Creator from us as well. And they buy all these different things, right? But how do we really know what the total value of that customer is? How much money have they given me over their lifetime? And based on that total value, maybe I want to know, I want to tier them off. Maybe someone who's paid me over $1,000 in the year, maybe they're a gold customer and they get a better level of support. Maybe I send them different email campaigns with different promo codes when holiday season comes around. Or any kind of, segregation that I want to do, I can do so based on that. Otherwise, you can run a report and say, let me see all the potentials that have closed against this account. But you don't actually have when you run the report, that information is not getting updated in the CRM anywhere. So you can't go and segment your contact list based on people who have paid you over $1,000, right? You have to actually have that calculated somehow and then pushed into CRM as a field. So you can do that, and we'll be doing that later. And then the other one is automatically create recurring potentials. So in the termite example or the exterminator example, whatever it was, I schedule a cleaning for today, and then 6 months later, I automatically want to schedule my follow-up cleaning because I always, I do semi-annual cleanings, and I'll go on site. So whenever I close one deal or actually mark that potential as, job serviced or job finished, I want to automatically create the next one for me 6 months down the line, as long as it's an active customer. Unless the customer decides that they like termites more than they like paying me, then I can mark them as an inactive customer, and then we'll no longer create recurring potentials for them. So all this information that I talked about in all these examples, they also kind of boil down to two things. One is taking all the information that's in your CRM and being able to manipulate that, calculating one thing from one place, calculating something from another place, putting them all together, reorganizing them, and then having some different output. And the third one, or second option, is connecting external data. So if we need to pull Eventbrite information, for example, or we need to pull in accounting information, whatever other application that you're using, have the information in the CRM interact with that third-party information to make your information in the CRM a little bit more powerful. So these are supposed to be wheels, I'm pretty sure, and look, the wheels move. So that's kind of what custom functions do. It automates a lot of the processes and makes things easier for you, and also gives you a little bit more insight into what's actually happening in the CRM. Okay, so custom functions are triggered whenever workflow criteria are met. Samir talked about how when something is triggered in the CRM to trigger a workflow, you can either have an email sent, you can create a task, or you can update a field. But those are three pretty basic things. What if you want to do something more? What if you just want to create an event? Maybe we want to create a potential, which we'll do in a bit. Maybe we want to send information to a third-party software. Whatever we want to do, it happens with the custom function. So it uses this language that we created on our own. It's called Deluge. Deluge is actually an acronym. It stands for Data Enriched Language on the Universal Grid Environment. And now you know why we call it Deluge and not that. And that language powers Zoho CRM, Zoho Creator. Custom functions are coming to Zoho Support soon. And the plan is eventually this will be rolled out to more and more Zoho applications where you can use this automation with any application to trigger workflows and trigger different automations to happen. We have a drag and drop script builder, which we'll talk about and see in a little bit. Lets you create advanced automations depending on your definition of advanced. And honestly, hands down, it's the most powerful feature in the CRM. It can pretty much do anything, and there's really not too many limitations on it. Unless you ask a couple partners, they might say differently, but that's what it is. So there's two options when it comes to building custom functions. One is going to be gallery functions, and one is going to be writing your own. Gallery functions are functions that have already been written out for you. We had a couple of guys do it. There's like maybe 5, 7, maybe 10, if you're lucky, pre-built solutions for you. For example, one of the pre-built ones that I'm not going to be working through is going to be if someone enters their zip code in the zip code field in the CRM under a contact, it's going to go and search online, find out what that guy's city and state is, and then update the city and state with a standardized format of, maybe all caps and maybe the state being in 2 letters or the full name of the letter or the full name of the state, however you want it to do. Basically, a basic level address verification we have already built into the CRM. A couple other ones are creating a project immediately when a potential is closed, and I'll show you a couple of those examples. But it's just a pre-list group of functions that have already been written for you. You can tweak them if you want to, but they're kind of just there to get your feet wet and get you started. But in this case, since we're pros, we're going to be using one gallery function, and then we're going to go through and build our own in a little bit here. All right, so what is my problem? So two problems are, how do I find how much money someone's giving me, and how do I know who my most loyal customers are? They kind of go one in one. Someone's loyal if they give me money. Someone's not loyal if they stop giving me money. So it's really important for me to know who my most valuable people are. So what do I want to do with that information once I know who's loyal? Like I mentioned before, we can provide different account tiers. We can do selective drip campaigns, maybe a special service level agreement saying that if you pay me more than $1,000 a year, I might respond to you, or I might even give you my phone number. I might give you Ricky's phone number, or otherwise you're stuck with email support or maybe chat support. So I can offer a lot of different support options simply based on how much money they've given me or how much value I found in that. So what we're going to be going through first is a demo on these roll-up potentials, which is what we're going to see here. All right, so we're going to pop into the CRM here. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see. Hopefully that helps. So it's under the automation section, and under automation we got alerts, tasks, field updates, webhooks, and custom functions. Not all of you might see all these tabs. If you don't see all these tabs, it's because you're not on our Enterprise Edition. So maybe you should get on our Enterprise Edition. But in this case, we're just going to go to custom functions, and you can see here I've got one already created for rolling up potential amount to accounts, but we're just going to make a new one. So when I click configure custom function, I have three options: picking one from the gallery, using one that I've already customized, or writing one from scratch, right? In this example, like I said, we're going to build one from the gallery, so I'm going to click on that. So this is our gallery that we have. It's still small. It's working on it. Anybody who writes a custom function can submit it to us. We'll throw it in the gallery, assuming it works, and it doesn't destroy anything. We'll throw it in the gallery, and other people can use it, and you can just be a good Samaritan about it. And in this case, we're going to be using the very first example that says, basically means every time a potential closes, we want to have a field in the accounts tab, for example, updated with how much money they've given me or the total value of that customer, right? So I'm going to click on configure here. So first thing I get to do is pick what module it's going to be associated with. Well, since the trigger is really on the potentials, whenever a potential closes, update account information, I'm going to make the module that's going to be associated with my potentials module. So the first thing I get to do is pick up my account ID. Right? So I picked up the account ID. So basically what this is, so this is every piece of information that's associated to this one potential. So in the potential, the first section we have here, these are all the fields under the potential, right? Stages, types, all that kind of stuff. And then every potential by default is associated with an account. So it's going to pull up all the related accounts information, all the fields from the accounts module here. And then every potential by default can also be associated with the campaign, so we're pulling in campaign information, can also be associated with the contact, so I'm pulling in contact information, and you can see that any information related to a potential can really be brought in here. But in this case, we're going to keep it simple and just pick account ID. Then I got to pick my sum up field. So what is a sum up field? A sum up field is going to be where that value is stored, right? So first I'm telling it what account ID to use, or which account am I going to update, and then I got to say, where do I want that update to go? I don't even know where I want that update to go. That's why I want to use screenshots. So let me find out where I want that update to go. So I'm going to come into accounts here, and let's click on a company name. And we're going to call this our total revenue field, right? So I'm going to pick it and say total revenue field, and click save. So now I've executed this thing. Let me edit it. And I'm going to click edit function. So this is the script that's there. You don't need to really know how it works or whatever. We'll get into that after the next example. But I'm going to say V2 just so I know which one I want to use. And click save. So now it's been saved, and now it's called V2. So now the next thing I got to do is go and associate this action with the workflow that I generate in the CRM. So we're going to come under rules, and we're going to create a new rule. Let me delete the rule that already existed and make a new one. And here we pick the module again, so the trigger module is potentials, just like Samir covered in his basic session. Let's say, what is this, total? All right. If I wasn't lazy, you'd put a good description there. Descriptions are important. And when do we want this to be executed? We want it to be executed whenever that potential is marked as closed won, right? So whenever something changes in the potential, that's a record action is based on a change in a record, obviously a record action. So record action is what I'm going to pick here. and my trigger is going to be a field update. If you don't see field update, it's also because you're not in Enterprise Edition. So this would be another thing you might not see. So then I can select up to 3 fields that I want to monitor here that is going to constantly monitor for a change, and whenever that change is met, it's going to trigger the workflow. So what field do I want to monitor? I want to monitor the stage field, right? I can select if I want to change multiple fields at the same time, but in this case, it's simple, it's just the stage field. So I'll click next. So the next thing after I know when I want the trigger to happen, I don't want this workflow to be triggered every single time the stage is updated. I only want it to be triggered whenever the stage is closed won, right? So I can say whenever the stage is closed won. So this way it'll check the criteria, and every time the potential is updated or the stage field is changed, only if the stage field equals closed won will it actually go and execute this custom function. So now all I gotta do is pick my custom function from here, my Mr. V2, and associate it, and click save. All done. That's all it really took. So let's see it in action. And I hope it works this time. So I got this company InGen, right? So let me delete the total revenue field out of here and save it for now. So now it's 0, right? It hasn't been calculated at all. So I got a couple potentials in the CRM already here, 3 of them. One of them is closed won, and 2 of them are in still open stages, right? So that's a $5,000 deal, and let's add it to a $20,000 deal, right? So that field should be $25,000 if I close this deal, then 5,000 plus 20,000 is 25,000, right? So it's going to take the one that's already been closed, add it to the new one that just got closed, and then update that field. So let's hope it works here. I'm going to change the stage from proposal price quote to closed won, and click save, right? Nothing happened. Let me do a quick refresh, and then we're going to go back into the account. So now I go into the account, voila, 25,000, right? It took us like 3 minutes to do, really, not that hard. But that's just a very basic one. So now even if I go in here and change, now that I know it works, I can mess with this a little bit more. If I close this one and say the insurance analyst visit finished, I can mark that one as closed won. And now, what is the total revenue for InGen? 50,000. 50,000. Look at that. All right, cool. So it works, right? But if I had picked a different account that had potentials associated with it, let's say Apex Corp, for example, Apex Corp, someone that's not scripted, there's no total revenue. If I scroll down and go to potentials and close this one, it should say 15,000. Save. Apex Corp, 15,000. So it works for multiple things, not just the one that I scripted, right? Everyone thinks that's pretty basic? Nobody's mind blown? All right, cool. If you are mind blown, then that's cool. So I got a bunch of screenshots in here. This is just going to be there so you can review them when we share the presentations later. Look, they got cool little blur effects and stuff like that. So we entered basic information. Just to recap, we set the trigger to be the field update. We also set our criteria to be closed won. Oh, that's a cool little animation. All right. We associated a custom function, so we clicked on the folder icon. We picked our custom function from the gallery, which was the roll-up potentials one. And then I associated my fields like I did down there. And then it was associated, and then it was all done. And then we saw it work. Okay, so that one worked. So now a little bit more complicated. We need to create recurring potentials, right? So every time a potential is closed, we want to be able to create a new one automatically, except this time we need to set the closing date to be, in my example, it's going to be 6 months out in advance, right? So there's 4 steps whenever we start building a custom function, and this is kind of just coding in general, but in this case, we'll talk about custom functions. So there's 4 steps. First thing you got to do is know what you want to do. Next step you have to do is you want to write it in pseudocode. So pseudocode is kind of writing things in plain English, right? You know, if something, if then this, otherwise do this. Just plain English ways to, in detail, describe what you really want to do. But it's like this video of like this professor at Harvard or something like that, and he has his class and he's teaching people to code for the very first time. So he brings 30 kids on the stage, and basically he puts a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a jar of jelly in front of each one of them. And then he asked the class to give them instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So the first person yells out, "Open the bag," right? So one guy on stage just like tears open the bag because he didn't tell him to like, unwind the little twisty tie thing, gently pull out pieces of bread. And then someone says, someone yelled out, put jelly on the bread. So he took the jar of jelly and just put it on the bread. He didn't take it out. So it kind of just, you want to explain exactly what you want to do to map out what you're trying to accomplish. That's called pseudocode. Then we want to write the function in Deluge, which is going to be the actual coding part of it. And the very last part is associating it to a workflow, which we already know how to do, so that's the easy part. So first things first, what do we want to do? So whatever echoes the deal, like I mentioned before, if the potential type is set to be a recurring potential, because sometimes I might have one-off services, but in the normal case, I'll have recurring business that happens, a semi-annual checkup or whatever. So only if the potential type is set to be recurring, then create a new potential automatically with the closing date to be 6 months in advance, right? Everyone with me so far? Kind of a simple concept, nothing too insane. So then we need to write in simple terms, right? So first thing is we know what our trigger is. The trigger is going to be the field update based on that stage field being marked as closed won. Same like it almost always is. The criteria is going to be only when the stage is closed won and only if the type of potential that I have is set to be recurring. Those are two criteria. Then the action. Same thing I wrote kind of on the last page. I think I even copied and pasted a little bit. Create a new potential with the same information, except for the closing date being 6 months in the future. So what I need to do is I need to pull some information from the current potential, copy that information, and then create a new potential with that same one, right? So basic information on a potential is kind of like the name of the potential, what stage it's in, the closing date, how much it costs, and who it's associated with. 4 things here. First thing is the amount. I want to copy the amount field. I don't have to copy it. If I know what the amount of the recurring potential is, then I could manually type it in, but we'll go through the example. We'll see a live demo. This is just screenshots for later, but it's easier to explain this way. So what this does is it's going to pull the amount field, the value of the amount field, from the current potential and bring it in so we can start working with it. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring the closing date of the current potential and bring it in so we start working with it. Then we're going to set the account ID. So the company that the potential is associated with, we need to know that, so we're going to bring that in. These are the same argument kind of situation that we were using on the gallery function where we match the account ID and the sum up field. And the very last thing is a potential name. So really the only thing important here is the account ID, because the amount would probably be the same every time you have a recurring service. Maybe it's a $100 flat fee. So I don't even have to really put that in. I could manually type that in if I wanted to. Same thing with the closing date. I wouldn't really have to do it. We'll do it without those. And the potential name, I can manually name it as well. So this is just passing information from the current potential into the function. That's what an argument is. So it kind of looks like this on the screen, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then once I've named all these things, so I named them P amount, P closing date, P account ID, and P potential name, I match them up with the field in potentials. So I already associated the module potentials up there, and then I can say that P amount is equal to the amount field, P closing date is equal to the closing date field, account ID field, and so on. So now we're going to start writing the function. So the very first step is we need to take the closing date and add 6 months to it, right? So what I can say is the new closing date equals the current closing date and add 6 months. That's really all it is, right? Next step is we have to create a map to organize the field names with the new values. So what is a map? So a map is basically a grouping of, in this case, field names and field values, right? So the field name is potential name, and the field value is the value that we pulled from the existing potential, right? So we're matching the amount field name with the amount from the potential. What we're doing here, we're just creating kind of like a set of field names and field values. What's the last step once we mapped everything out? We just need to create the potential. So in the last session, the gentleman that asked me to see the code, we kind of saw something similar here. We're going to create a new potential, and we're going to go to the CRM, and we're going to create something in the potentials module, and then we know where we're going to put it, and now we need to know what we need to put in that potentials module. So what we're going to put in is going to be that new potential map that we just generated. So this is the new potential map, and then we're throwing it in there. Everyone with me so far? So this is the full thing. Really, it's like 10 lines minus 3 because I put comments to make it a little bit easier to read. and we can cut some of them out too. So it could be less than 10 lines to really make this recurring thing work. And then you associate it to a workflow. So instead of seeing screenshots, let's just build it out from scratch real quick so people believe me that it actually works. Let's make a new one. We're going to write our own. So here, what I'm going to do, all right, I'm okay on time. So let's call this recurring potentials v2, right? I picked the module that I want to associate it with. In this case, it's going to be potentials. Now I get to add arguments. So the arguments is, like I mentioned before, it's what's being passed from the current potential into this function. So in this case, I'm only going to really pass the account ID, because that's all I really care for, and I'm going to call this my P account ID. Why is it the only thing that I care for? I'm going to come back here and go back, because technically the account ID is the only thing that I need from that existing potential to bring in. The name is going to be the same. I can manually set the name if I wanted to. The amount is going to be the same, so I can manually set it because I know how much the amount is going to be. And the closing date, I can use today's closing date, today being the date that the function is being triggered, and add 6 months to it. So if we want to copy this, then I can copy it just to keep it a little bit more on the consistent side. So let's add a couple more then. They tell me this is easier. So we'll say the potential name. So we'll call this P name. And then we'll say amount, and we'll say P amount. And then we'll say closing date, right? P closing date, right? Done. So now you can see at the very top, which it's very small, so I'm sorry, but it'll say int, which stands for integer because it's a number. Account ID, it's going to bring in the name, it's going to bring in the amount, and it's going to bring in the closing date. Right? So we're bringing information from the current potential into this function so we can go mess with it. So the first thing we got to do is add 6 months to the closing date, right? So there's a couple ways I can run with this. One, we have a drag and drop builder. So if I want to set a variable, I can simply drag it over there. And what's the name of the variable? Variable is going to be my new closing date, right? And what do I want this variable to be? Well, I want to take the current closing date, P closing date, and I need to add information to it. I need to add 6 months, right? So I can come over here to the functions, which are a way to manipulate information in the system. And we're going to add not a day, not a month, not a year. Months. Yeah, that's what we're doing. Months. Nope, not get month. Oops. It was on the top, wasn't it? Add month, right? So by default, it threw in 2 just so I know what to put in there, but I want to do 6, so I'll say 6, right? Done. So it writes the code automatically for me. It takes the P closing date, adds 6 months, and that is equal to the new closing date. Everyone with me so far? Not too crazy. So line 1 is done, right? So the next thing we got to do is create a mapping so we can kind of store all that information. How do we do that? I can come over here and do a drag and drop as well, and I can set a variable, which is what I'm doing it again. And so let's call this my potential map, right? And what I'm going to do is come back to my built-in functions and just call it a map. So map functions, where is it? Map. Done. That makes this variable equal to a map. So it knows that in the future, I can start adding a field name and a field value to this one variable that we've defined now, right? So we've been doing this drag and drop, and this is going to be what a lot of people use just to get started with. But since I've been doing this for a long time, and it's a little bit easier for me, we can pop them into free flow scripting. So what this does is it lets me type however I want to, right? So to make it a little bit quicker, what I want to do now is I need to add things to this map, right? I need to add the field name, and I need to add the field value that I want to have associated with it, right? So let me copy potential map, and I want to put something in this map. So conveniently, it's called put. And let's say potential name. Whoops. And I need to give it a value, so let's call it P name, right? That's what it's called. Yep. That's it. I'm lazy, so I'm going to copy and paste this a couple of times. And so potential name, we're going to, this is going to be my amount, right? P amount. This is going to be my closing date. And this is going to be my, what do we call it? new closing date. And then the last thing is going to be the account ID, right? So account ID, and let's make this P account ID. Done, right? Almost done. So I added 6 months. So I added 6 months to the closing date. I matched up all the fields and their values. And now the last step I got to do is actually go and send a command to create the new potential. So in this case, I'm going to pop back into my script builder because it's a little bit easier this way. So it's saved, right? So let me pop back in here. So we'll come back in here and we'll edit this and add the last line. So the last thing we want to do is we want to send the information to CRM to create a new record, right? So I can scroll down here and I can, in this case, we're going to call a function. Where'd you go? Calling a function. So here I can use an integration task. So I pick this product that I want to integrate with, CRM. What do I want to do? I want to create a new record. Where do I want to create it? I can click the drop down and pick potentials. Potentials. And what do I want to create in potentials? I can click on the drop down and add the new potential map. And the response can just be whatever. Create potential. Done. Save. Finished. Not that bad. So now we've got this thing made. We just need to associate it to a workflow. So let's create a new rule. And I already have a rule there, so let me delete the rule. All right, create the rule. So again, we're working in the potentials tab, and we're going to say recurring potentials. No description, because we're short on time. And we're going to create a record action. Same thing as last time, field update, stage is what we're monitoring. And the criteria here is going to be stage is closed one, except this time we're going to add another one and say the type is going to be recurring, right? Next step, call the custom function. Pick it up from my folder and say it is recurring potentials v2 and associate it, and we're done. We're finished. So let's see how it actually works and pray it actually does work, right? So I got this potential in the system here. Let's just say this debugging. We'll use the same example. And I'm going to edit it. And we're going to pop it out from being closed one. And I'm also going to change the type from nothing to recurring, right? And click save. So now I got something that's in the pipeline. It's a recurring potential, but it hasn't closed yet. So when I come back and mark it as, let's edit it again and change it to be closed one. And click save. Now if we go to the account name, immediately based on the trigger was an instant action, right? So immediately when I updated that field from whatever stage it was to closed one, it immediately created that recurring potential. If I was doing it a little bit smarter, instead of immediately creating it, I would probably create it 60 days out. So I could do a time-based action and then trigger the function to create that potential in 60 days, rather than having it sit open for 60 days. That kind of makes sense? So this way we could track if it actually stayed active for those 60 days or during those 60, because think about it, if this one gets created and then the cleaning date is set for 6 months in the future, and in the next 2 weeks he tells me, you know what, I like termites, I don't need you to come out anymore, then that potential still sits there, right? So I need to do a check on that criteria later, or 60 days down the line, to see if he's still recurring and still an active customer, and then create the potential. So there's a couple different ways you can work it. So look, I'm going to take this debug security system, and I'm going to change it from, so go to engine. Look, did this work? That was the one I did. You see how there's no stage? That's weird. Everything should have a stage. Why is there no stage? Because no one caught that I didn't actually add a stage line to define what stage the new potential that's created should be added with. Other thing it did, I was also taking the name of the current potential and duplicating it in the CRM, right? But I had the duplicate check on. So when a duplicate check is on, it's going to check if there's a potential with that same name already there, and then it's not going to make it for me anymore. So it was my bad, but it works. Did this work? Works.